This is Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States. On September 11th, 2022, Harris sat down with Chuck Todd of NBC News, who asked her about the southern border.
I want to ask you about the border. Would you call the border secure?
I think that there is no question that we have to do what the President and I asked Congress to do. Is the first request we made. Pass a bill to create a pathway to citizenship. The border is secure, but we also have a broken immigration system, in particular over the last 4 years before we came in, and it needs to be fixed.
So the Biden-Harris administration has been in office for 20 months. And since the time Joe Biden took office, encounters at the southwest border spiked and have remained at record highs. From February 2021 to August 2022, there have been close to 3.6 million encounters at the southern border. But as per usual, Kamala Harris and the rest of the failure administration refuse to take responsibility for anything. Instead, they blame Orange Man Bad for a broken immigration system. Now, before we go on, and so that we're all on the same page, here's an explainer of some of those past and current policies. Under Title 8 United States Code Section 1325, any alien who enters or attempts to enter the United States at any time or place other than as designated by immigration officers is a criminal act. Violators can receive a sentence of up to 6 months in prison and shall be subject to a civil penalty of up to $250. This is all very straightforward stuff. If you cross the border illegally, you should probably be going to prison. However, there's some loopholes. Title 8, Section 1225 states that if the officer determines at the time of the interview that an alien has a credible fear of persecution, the alien shall be detained for further consideration of the application for asylum. Then there's Title 8, Section 1158 that allows any alien who is physically present in the United States or who arrives in the United States, irrespective of such alien status, to apply for asylum. So if a migrant is caught crossing the border, they can claim asylum or claim that they have a credible fear. But instead of following the law set by Congress and detaining these migrants, the Department of Homeland Security has the discretion to release migrants while they await hearings and interviews. This practice is called catch and release. But there's a problem. Only a small percentage of these migrants have a legitimate asylum or credible fear claim. The Republican Policy Committee wrote in 2021, out of every 100 people who claim credible fear at the border, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services will find credible fear in 83 cases. Of those 83 cases, only 45 actually will end up applying for asylum, and only 14 are ultimately granted asylum. In other words, most migrants claiming credible fear and applying for asylum have a fake claim. The reality is that most migrants who cross the border are doing it for jobs and better economic opportunity. So in 2019, after a surge at the border occurred between January and May, the Trump administration searched for solutions. First, they sought to limit so-called catch and release by holding illegal border crossers in detention, and images of crowded detention facilities caused Democrats and members of the media to frickin' lose it. Here's former acting USCIS Director Ken Cuccinelli speaking to ABC News' John Karl.
How can you allow this to happen if you don't have the resources? You can't detain these people, can you? Isn't that a basic human rights violation?
No. I mean, they're being fed, they're being, as you
they don't even have enough
yourself,
space to lie down.
Well, you know, that's a reality of facilities not designed to handle the swamping at the border. We've had 4 months in a row with over 100,000 apprehensions.
So John Karl is saying, without evidence by the way, that it's a human rights violation to detain these men. And John, who looks like he's about to start crying at any minute, says that we should ignore the law and just let them all go. Because feelings.
And
but you do
your
have
alternative is to let them all go.
Exactly.
And that is the wrong alternative. You have just said, don't worry about the law. We're going to ignore the border. Well,
isn't there also a law about how you treat human beings? Aren't there?
There are standards.
Standards,
yes,
and international standards. There are human rights.
Their human rights are being violated. Not true, by the way. But it was the Democrat talking point at the time, designed to vilify the Trump administration and their border policy.
If you can't detain them humanely, you have an alternative, which is what was done for many years before, which is to release them and ask them to come back for their asylum hearings.
And of course, many of them never show up.
Fact check true. According to a review of statistics yearbooks from the Executive Office of Immigration Review, in 2017, there was a 43% failure to appear rate, with similar rates during the previous 2 years. And from 2013 to 2017, of the nearly 2.7 million foreign nationals released into the interior on their own recognizance, roughly 1 million deportation orders were issued for failure to appear in immigration court. That's a 37% failure to appear rate. But John Carl, who apparently lives in a bubble in Washington, D.C., is like, gee, why can't we just let all the illegal border crossers into the interior until our asylum hearings? But doing that would ignore common sense. Because if someone is willing to break the law to enter the country, where's the guarantee that they're going to comply with a court order? So the reasoning for the Trump administration actually detaining illegal border crossers, besides the fact that it's against the law, is that it acted as a deterrent. Because if you don't have a valid claim of asylum, you're just going to waste time in detention before you're ultimately expelled.
When is this going to end?
This is going to end when we close asylum loopholes and we stop attracting people here illegally.
So you're saying that
to try and overwhelm the system and do exactly what you described, and that's just release them into the interior when they'll never show up again.
So this is going to go on until Congress passes laws that show no sign of going anywhere right now.
As you saw, the June numbers came way down from May. We expect to be taking steps on the administration side to reduce the pull for folks to come here, even if Congress won't act.
And that's exactly what happened. On July 16th, 2019, the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security implemented an interim final rule, which would be labeled as the Remain in Mexico policy. How it worked was simple. Let's say that a migrant claims to be escaping gang violence in Guatemala. Once that person crosses the border into Mexico, that person is out of harm's way and therefore should apply for asylum in Mexico. The regulation required that if you passed through a country before reaching the US and you did not apply for asylum there, then you would be ineligible to apply for asylum in the United States. Because asylum is about safety and not shopping around for the country that's going to give you the best deal. So, after months of sharply increasing illegal border crossings, the Remain in Mexico policy was implemented, and you'll never guess what happened. U.S. Border Patrol encounters and apprehensions significantly dropped and stabilized. The fact is, the Remain in Mexico policy was a success, because when you don't incentivize illegal border crossings, you get less illegal border crossings. Then, in March 2020, at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, the United States declared a health emergency, and President Trump ordered that Title 42 of United States Code Section 265 be implemented. That statute, suspension of entries and imports from designated places to prevent spread of communicable diseases, allowed the Surgeon General, in accordance with the President, to effectively shut down the border. That's because it was determined that by reason of existence of COVID-19 in Mexico and Canada, that there was a serious danger of the further introduction of COVID-19 into the United States. Here's some statistics. In July 2020, U.S. Border Patrol encountered 38,836 persons crossing the southwest border. Of these persons, 35,376 were expelled under Title 42, and 3,160 were processed under Title 8. That means that at least 91% were sent back across the border. So between cutting down on catch and release, implementing Remain in Mexico, and Title 42, the situation at the border had finally started to calm down. But then Joe Biden took office and f***ed everything up. I know you're shocked. The month after the failure administration took office in 2021, encounters at the southern border rose 28.92%. And the Washington Post quickly went to Biden's defense and claimed that when comparing numbers from 2018 and 2019, the rise in border encounters was a predictable seasonal increase. In other words, the Washington Post was saying, actually, it's normal. It's not Joe Biden's fault. Besides, he just got here. But long story short, they were completely wrong. 2 weeks after that piece was written, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol reported that from February to March, there was a 70.4% increase in persons attempting entry along the southern border. In fact, there were as many border encounters during Biden's first 8 months as there were for the previous 23 months combined. And that's largely because in February 2021, the Biden administration ended the Remain in Mexico policy, which predictably encouraged more people to illegally cross the border. Womp womp. So no, the massive amount of southwest border encounters weren't because of seasonal increases. It's happening for one reason and one reason only: the failure administration's feckless border policy. In the last 11 months, there have been 2.15 million encounters on the southwest border. Of those, about 1 million were expelled under Title 42, about 1 million were processed under Title 8, and additionally, there were 129,000 labeled as Title 8 inadmissibles. Now, CBP and ICE do not provide statistics regarding exactly how many people are expelled under Title 8, but we do have a pretty good idea that most of them are not. Here's some math. According to CBP's August operational report, nationwide 1,300,467 have been expelled or repatriated. So when you take the total number of expelled or repatriated and subtract the verified Title 42 expulsions and the Title 8 inadmissibles, that leaves 170,000 expulsions, circumstances unclear. So if you take the remaining number of expulsions and repatriations and subtract it from the total of migrants processed under Title 8, you will get a total of 850,000 who were not expelled. To put it simpler, there were 2.15 million southwest border encounters. Nationwide, there were 1.3 million people expelled or repatriated, which leaves 850,000 not expelled or repatriated. In other words, for the last 11 months alone, the Biden administration has let at least 850,000 migrants into the interior. That means that at least 83% of everyone processed under Title 8 has been allowed to stay. Because according to the New York Times, these migrants will have to wait 7 years on average before a decision on their case is reached because of the nation's clogged immigration system. Why? Because as of August 2022, the immigration court system had a backlog of 1.9 million cases. That number has increased 50% just in the last 2 years, partially because of courts being shut down because of COVID, but mostly because Biden has essentially opened the border, despite what Kamala Harris told everyone.
The United States will continue to enforce our laws and secure our border. Do not come. Do not come.
And that brings us back around to where we started. Let's watch Chuck Todd ask Vice President Kamala Harris for a second time in the same interview about the situation at the southern border.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border is secure?
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration.
That is a blatant lie. Our border is not remotely secure. Even the New York Times recognizes this, admitting that hundreds of thousands have entered the country undetected during Biden's term. To be more precise though, Bill Melugin of Fox News tweeted that CBP sources claimed that there have been more than 900,000 gotaways since fiscal year 2021 and well over 500,000 since last October.
But there are still a lot of problems that we are trying to fix, given the deterioration that happened over the last 4 years.
So even though border encounters are higher under the Biden-Harris administration than they have ever been in history, it's Trump's fault. Got it. But don't worry, America. Kamala Harris has a solution to fix the problem.
We also have to put in place a law and a plan for a pathway for citizenship for the millions of people who are here and are prepared to do what is legally required to gain citizenship.
So Kamala Harris says the solution to fixing the problem is to give an estimated 11.7 million illegal immigrants a pathway to citizenship. Of course, that's not going to fix anything, but it will incentivize even more illegal border crossings.
Do not come.
Do not come.
Anyway, if you think Kamala Harris is out of touch with reality, then you have to watch this clip of White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre being asked about conflicting federal policy about COVID.
Somebody unvaccinated comes over on a plane. You say that's not okay. Somebody walks into Texas or Arizona unvaccinated. They're allowed to stay. Why?
But that's not how it works. Like we actually, no.
I know that that's not what you guys want to happen, but that is what is happening.
But that's not, it's not like somebody walks over and that's not how.
Exactly what's happening.
It's not like somebody just walks across the border. That's not how it works. Not only is that the dumbest thing Karine Jean-Pierre has ever said from behind a podium, but it's easily one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. Days later, Jackie Heinrich of Fox News pointed out to Karine that Donald Trump isn't the president anymore.
Yesterday, you repeatedly blamed the Trump administration for what we're seeing at the southern border, but the record crossings have been happening under President Biden. One migrant we interviewed yesterday thanks the president for keeping the border open. So I just want to confirm the way that this administration sees it, ending Remain in Mexico or Title 42 had nothing to do with the surge that we're seeing.
So let me just step back for a second and lay out what we have done.
So then Karine starts to brag about how many migrants have been expelled.
Individuals taken into CBP custody are either expelled under the CDC's Title 42 authority as required by court order or placed in a removal procedures. In fact, more individuals encountered at the border will be removed or expelled this year than any previous year. That is just a fact.
Of course, the big reason that there have been a record number of expulsions is because there have been record numbers of border crossings. And I should point out that the only reason that so many people have been expelled is because of Trump's Title 42 policy, which, surprise, surprise, Joe Biden tried to get rid of earlier this year by ordering the CDC to terminate the order. Thankfully, a federal judge shot that down, and Title 42 is in place for the moment.
What about the record crossing number? I mean, you're reading off, expulsions and things like that because all these people are coming over.
Yes, and they're also being encountered. Individuals encountered are also being removed or expelled in this year, removed more in this year than any previous year.
Karine bragging about record expulsions is like when Trump said if you test more for COVID, you're going to find more COVID cases. And then there's President Biden, who is presiding over the largest border crisis in our history. Let's see what he has to say about it.
On the border, why is the border more overwhelmed under your watch, Mr. President?
Because there are 3 countries that there are fewer immigrants coming from Central America and from Mexico. This is a totally different circumstance.
Biden is referring to statistics in the August CBP operational report, saying that 35% of unique encounters were from Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua, and that there were fewer encounters from Mexico and the Northern Triangle.
What's on my watch now is Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua.
So instead of taking any responsibility, Biden, as per usual, blames everyone else. That there's more coming from different countries than before. It's not my fault. Come on, man.
And the ability to send them back to those states is not rational. You could send them back and have them, we're working with Mexico and other countries to see if we can stop the flow. But that's the difference.
Translation: if you're from Cuba, Nicaragua, or Venezuela, and you've ever considered making the trek to the United States, make a beeline to the border, because Biden just said that sending you back wouldn't be rational. So much for that secure border, huh? Anyway, that's it for now. Follow me on Twitter at Don'tWalkRun. Be sure that you're still subscribed to the channel, and as always, I hope to see you next time. If there is a next time.